Hello and welcome to Pearl Magazine. Last June 4th, thousands of Hong Kongers came out in force defying a police ban on holding a candlelight vigil on the 5th anniversary of the Tiananmen pro-democracy protests. This type of action could be criminalized once the security law is put into action in the territory.
Well, the anniversary coincided with the passing of a new bill outlawing disrespect to China's national anthem. Now, Mel, you talked to people from both the local and international business sectors about how the adoption of these laws might affect Hong Kong as a place of free enterprise and a global financial center. Let's take a look.
It's been 1 year since anti-government protests broke out in Hong Kong. This against the backdrop of an escalating trade war between the U.S. and China, which Hong Kong has been drawn into once again as the U.S. is threatening to revoke the territory's special status after China legislated to enact a security law here. The protests, combined with the coronavirus pandemic, have both dealt a blow to the economy, which saw a contraction of almost 9% year-on-year in the first quarter. According to a government report, private consumption has dropped over 10% in the same period. Could the law, combined with a threat by U.S. President Trump to Hong Kong's special status, see international business flee the territory?
70% of the companies said they're not planning to leave. So that's a pretty high number. There is a wait and see. It's too early to make those judgments. And Hong Kong is a very valuable spot to do business. A lot of people are deeply invested here, both personally and professionally. You don't just up and go.
Economist Janet Powell agrees, saying Trump's response appears to be a strong opening stance on Hong Kong. In fact, the U.S. enjoyed a trade surplus with Hong Kong of over $33 billion in 2018, according to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Rescinding its special status could hurt U.S. manufacturers.
Some of these measures that the U.S. might be taking to revoke Hong Kong's special trade status would not actually hurt Hong Kong, would actually hurt the U.S.
Pam Mack, president of the Hong Kong Small and Medium Enterprises Association and owner of this wine business, says that when the protests hit, her mainland customers, which make up more than half of her customers, stopped coming in.
Most of the Chinese, they like American wines, because the style of the wine, of the US wine, they are big body, okay, and they are a little bit sweet. That's what Chinese like to drink. And before, right, we import a lot of US wine because there's a lot of Chinese people coming to buy the US wine here in Hong Kong.
So the U.S. winemakers lose out on this trade war?
It's true. It's not win-win. It's all that is hurting the wine market in US.
Pam said because of the protests and then the pandemic, she, like many other business owners, had to change the way she operated. Instead of staying open 7 days a week, she did 6. She also had to cut her part-time staff and cut working hours down. Many of the association members had to take similar measures.
They're doing the no pay leave, that's it. And they come in shift, like maybe they have 10 days no pay leave and only go to work 20 days like this. All this, but they did not fire that much people, but they want to keep it because we still have hope of our future.
In the first quarter of this year, unemployment soared to 5.2%, the highest in 9 years, according to the Hong Kong government. Underemployment saw a 10-year high at 3.1%. To cope with the protests and the pandemic, Pam went digital. She put her wares on 3 apps and found that her customer base increased.
The apps, the delivery, and surprisingly, they helped me to increase a lot of different, more young customers. I think it's really good, because they are our future.
Yes, exactly.
For the people who are my customer, really getting old, maybe they cannot drink wine anymore. That's why we need some new customers.
She says to save on overheads, she renegotiated her rent and she's shut down half of the shop, which saves on electricity. When customers want to come in, they open up the room.
And do you open it when people ask to see it?
Yeah, when the people come over to ask for special wine, we keep it there, so we open for them.
The association, made up of about 1,600 members, including those in retail, F&B, medical, education, and manufacturing, support the implementation of a security law.
What happened in Hong Kong is too long already. It's really too long after the protests and now the virus, right? That's why we need a peaceful life. We need to work on my business, okay? We need money because otherwise it's going to die. It's actually dying now, okay? But it's continued after the virus and the protest is coming back again. We cannot do any business. You can see in Tsim Sha Tsui, also in Sam Wan Chai, right? Many shops is closed already. Every country have their security law except Hong Kong. So for me, it's not anything really scary.
It's standard for any territory to have a security law. And while the Hong Kong Basic Law provides for the adoption of one of the biggest concerns is what the scope of that law might entail and how it could impact Hong Kong as a global financial hub. Jack Lang, a partner at a large American law firm and the former chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce, says it's appropriate for Hong Kong to have a security law. The fact that it's being driven by the National People's Congress is what has many companies concerned.
It's going to be a challenge, but it really has to be written in a way such that when you're thinking about doing something, you got a pretty good idea as to whether you're going to violate this law or not. Otherwise, it will generate a level of fear that will basically start saying to people, maybe you should think about someplace else.
He says it's important that the details are consistent with Hong Kong's common law.
Most crucially is how it's actually implemented and applied. Necessarily, there's going to be some ambiguity, there's going to be some broadness around it, but how the government goes about enforcing it will have the biggest impact on giving people confidence around the new system.
Tara Joseph, president of the American Chamber of Commerce, echoes these concerns.
So what we really need to understand is how the national security law will be enacted and also how it will be kept and who will oversee it.
Tara says many other issues have affected Hong Kong's business environment.
The security law is part of a long train of issues that have affected and impacted the international image of Hong Kong. The protests, the violence last year, and those visions of pictures of people all over the world has had an impact.
In fact, the ongoing trade war has hit Jack's business in mergers and acquisitions quite hard.
Those developments have had an impact. The most striking one is with respect to Chinese acquisitions in the U.S. and to some extent elsewhere overseas. 5 to 10 years ago, a pretty substantial part of our business involved helping Chinese companies trying to invest in the U.S. or do joint ventures with the U.S. and other international companies elsewhere in the world. A lot of that has dried up. In particular, it's extremely difficult for Chinese to acquire or even make minority investments in U.S. companies these days.
He says that for investment in the other direction, from the U.S. into China, the political environment has also had a significant impact. But he remains bullish on Hong Kong.
It wouldn't surprise me if Hong Kong gets through this phase with its reputation and status more or less intact. But to do it, I think even more often than in the past, is going to take some real leadership, both from the government side and from the opposition side. And I think and we haven't seen as much of that as we need to see for us to get through this.
In fact, Janet says Hong Kong Stock Exchange is benefiting from the current situation since more Chinese companies are choosing to list on the Hong Kong bourse. And as long as Hong Kong remains a good place to do business, she doesn't see an exodus.
I think in the bigger scheme of things, global companies that are operating in Hong Kong, they do have privileged access to the Chinese market, and they're also able to take advantage of the fundamental advantages of Hong Kong, like the rule of law, like the strong financial markets, many freedoms. And so I think a lot of the global companies here that in China, they are committed to the Chinese market. And we have to know that China is no longer just a cheap, low-cost manufacturing base for companies to operate, but the Chinese market is also growing. So in many sectors, a lot of companies are operating in Hong Kong as a hub for Greater China as well as Asia Pacific.
For now, foreign companies are keeping a close eye on developments in Hong Kong, but all are hopeful for a positive outcome.
A lot of international business people who are highly educated, globally minded, have called Hong Kong home. But I think the really difficult part is that people have very different visions of what they want Hong Kong to be. Should Hong Kong be a place, global exchange, liberal values and ideas, the freest part of China? Or, should Hong Kong be a place that is all about stability? You might have a very different vision than I do about what we want Hong Kong to be.
Hong Kong has always fulfilled a very important role as a gateway city. East and West can both feel comfortable here. Contracts can be signed that are good anywhere in the world because of internationally recognized law. International capital flows can take place here. But if those types of things don't remain in place, then Hong Kong can become marginalized. And Hong Kong is actually small enough that it can be collateral damage in a very difficult trade war between the United States and China.
Up next, how some businesses are making the most of their empty space.
Stay with us. Welcome back. The coronavirus pandemic has kept tourists away, shoppers off the street, and onto online platforms, leaving behind empty shops, even in the busiest consumer districts in Hong Kong.
There's been a surge in vacancy rates among street front stores, but as Alice Khan reports, it's actually an opportunity for some business operators to move from their upstairs venue inside the factory buildings to the prime street shops, as more landlords are willing to lower rent.
It's actually a jasmine blossoms. When you look at something that it will gradually open, then you will feel very good and calm down.
Vivian Mack has been in the tea business for 2 decades. She has a patent on the mainland on how she makes this jasmine blossom ball.
This is actually green tea bud from Dai Bak tea tree from Fuding, Fujian. And then these are the leaves. And then there are 2 kinds of flowers. This is actually 1000-day red, is the top, and is lily. The magic lies in a patented method of using just fresh jasmine flowers put together, scented into the balls, and it's actually sleep together for a whole night. So they absorb all the fragrance, and each of the ball will be sweet because of that. Jasmine is not being seen.
This particular tea is Vivian's best-selling product. While people typically brew tea in hot water, Vivian is trying something new. She believes this cold brew will sell well, too. Yet she has a problem. Her customers have to search for her shop inside this industrial building in Taiwan.
I think there is a niche for people who want healthy, like health-conscious people, to drink something that is so good, because I want the traffic. I want people to get to know quicker. It shouldn't be hidden. That's why I have an idea of why not get a space that everybody can just go with enough traffic to test the market.
Vivian used to own a tea shop and another tea bar in Wan Chai in 2003. But after her landlord refused to renew her lease, Vivian had to move all the products and inventory into this 4,000 square foot warehouse.
I think it's 2007. It's actually a long time ago. But it's just that the landlord decided not to continue. Even if the landlord decided to rent to us, continue to rent, maybe the rent is high.
Hong Kong's street shop rents started rising in 2004 and peaked in 2013. Despite a drop during the Occupy Central period in 2014, rents were high, very high in coveted street-level spaces. Last year, Vivian had planned to move back to a busy street to sell her handcrafted tea, but because rent was still very high, she called off her move. In the last month, though, there's been some movement in rent levels in her favor.
Sales volume has dropped dramatically, and most operators cannot go on, and they have to bankrupt and then close the shop. And that's the reason why the vacancy rate has surged dramatically.
Street-level retail vacancy rates in core areas stood at 9.2%, up from 6.5% in the third quarter of 2019 and from 5.6% in the first quarter of last year. Rental in prime areas across Hong Kong dropped as much as 80% compared to the peak in 2012 and 13. Vivian started looking for the right street shop earlier this month.
If we can find something that is suitable, I will be more than happy to try. Because, of course, we need to do the calculations. It's a business. Rent-wise, of course, has to be reasonable.
She is also thinking of setting up a grab-and-go tea bar in an area that has a high number of expat residents. This afternoon, she's in Central to check out a spot on Wyndham Street. This vacant shop is about 2,000 square feet. The landlord is asking $78,000 a month, a 70% cut from the peak in 2013.
I think the rent so far that they offer is quite reasonable. I mean, like if I come here like several years ago, maybe I couldn't afford. I think people are willing to spend. But of course, right now the situation is different. But I think it will be a possible spot or an area, district, that I can consider. Because restaurants around, people want something new, and sometimes they don't need the alcohol, they want tea, probably.
Vivian plans to sell her tea at $20 to $30 per bottle. If she rents this place for her grab-and-go tea bar, will she survive? One market expert says this location may not be a good place to run a tea business, since there is also a big tea house not far away.
If this tea shop is able to rent this shop for 70,000 Hong Kong dollar per month, 70,000 Hong Kong dollar per month, in order to break even, to make money, they need to have a monthly sales revenue of around 200,000. So the rent to sales ratio is around 30%. So in order to sell 200,000 Hong Kong dollars per month, then each day it's around 6,000 something. 6,000 something per bottle of tea, it's around $20, $30. So every day, this tea shop has to sell around 250 to 300 bottles. Based on today's environment, it's definitely difficult. Why? Because of the COVID-19. On the street, you don't see that many people. And it's because of the COVID-19, that's why the rent came down a lot. So I think for this shop, in today's environment, it's difficult. And also, it's for all the shops, what I recommend is, nowadays, it's all talking about O2O. O2O meaning is from offline to online operation. So the shop itself, if you only look at the traffic flow, the footfall is very low. And then, so if you do retail only, it's not enough to sustain the business. Rather, you have to do some more online promotion, and then people can, from the corporate office, the tourists, the people around this area, when they see the online promotion, then they can come to this shop to pick up the bottles.
Realtor Daniel Wong says business operators like Vivian should hold off for now before committing to a lease.
I think the rental is still a little bit room for further drop, maybe 10 to 20%. At this moment, most of the landlords is quite passive. They are quite willing to negotiate for better terms for the tenants. But up to now, most of the operators are still quite cautious about the future market. So they prefer to rent the properties at a very low level to lowering their expenses.
He says it may be wise to wait for the market to bottom out within the next 6 months. Edwin says the market will have to wait for the right conditions to see shop rents perk up again.
If the social unrest is more settled, then the rent is going to come back up again. So during the second term of the lease, after 2-3 years, if everything comes back, this shop can easily go back up to 150,000 or above. So the challenge is not about the first lease. The challenge is how you can sustain your business after you put in all the renovation, all the millions of dollars you decorate the place, and to make money after the first lease and hopefully sustain for the second and third lease.
Experts advise entrepreneurs to try their best to secure a long lease at the current low rents, beyond 3 years and even up to 9 years. In the 70s, newspapers were selling at 10 cents a copy. These pages were the main source of information for most people. Those selling the papers benefited the most. How are these papers different from today's broadsheets? Front pages used to be dominated by international news, not the local news these days. Before computer graphics were available, all photographs and drawings were hand-processed and printed. Many readers bought newspapers for the serials in the supplements, where popular genres like romance and martial arts were found. If you couldn't read the news in the morning rags, there were always the evening versions, hot off the presses at 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They were considered the latest news of the day, until they were replaced by the evening TV news programs in the 80s. Because news is a perishable product, sellers would bundle 2 unsold copies into one to cut losses at the end of the day. Before the internet era, the press provided a crucial channel of information for commuters, tea house patrons, and die-hard horse racing fans. Now, newspaper readership has been on the decline. There are now free newspapers and online media available. Only a few dozen are still surviving.
Next week, we find out why the lack of travel is benefiting some local businesses.
And we go tracking those who track mammals in the sea. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.